Hey everyone, Robert Ferringo and Raphael Esparza of Doc Sports back again with What Are the Odds? We're going to be breaking down some of the interesting lines on the college football and NFL betting board in just 1 minute, and we will have a free play for you from each of us at the end of this segment. First, I want to mention if you look down in the description, you can click on that link and get $60 free to be used at Doc Sports Services for anything that you want, basically. All the sports are full steam ahead right now, so you can use that free $60 for any package, for any handicapper, in any sport that you want. Also, be sure to like and subscribe, and look for this show every Wednesday from the two of us. So, Raphael, how you doing there, buddy?
I'm doing pretty good. I apologize for the last two Tuesdays I wasn't able to jump on because I was jumped knee deep into election trading. So I wanted to shoot myself in the head after Thursday's results were pretty much finalized. But missed you guys that's watching. But what a great weekend of just not just sports and not just sports betting, but just action on TV. We have great college football games. We have great NFL games, NBA, NHL, great college basketball games. The Grey Cup on Sunday. We got Mike Tyson fighting on Friday.
There it is. I knew it was coming.
We got John Bones Jones on Saturday at the MSG at UFC 309. Football Sunday and well, I don't want to say there's no football on Monday. Take the wife out for dinner, go on a date, watch Wolverine and Deadpool 3 on Disney Plus, because who wants to watch the Cowboys on Monday Night Football? But that's my rant later on in the show.
All right, let's get started with college football, though. And one of the numbers that jumped out at me first and foremost was this Tennessee-Georgia line. And as we are recording this Wednesday afternoon, this line is spiking. Okay, so it was released Sunday afternoon, Sunday evening. Georgia is a 9-point favorite. It has done nothing but skyrocket. It is up to 11 now at some sports books, and it made the move from 9.5 to 10 a little later in Tuesday evening, and then it's gone up another full point today on Wednesday. So, Raphael, Tennessee and Georgia, what am I missing here?
Yeah, I got off the phone with some of the books just about maybe 10 minutes ago because a good friend of mine, Tennessee alum, does everything bleeds orange. He wanted to know what the books thinking. And the books told me today we could see 13 by Saturday morning. If that means if it's 13 by Saturday morning and it's an evening game, who knows where it's going to go after that because you have all that extra time on Saturday. DraftKings opened this up at 8. I mean, where was I? I was sleeping. I must have been doing something else. Maybe recapping WNBA games. I don't know what I was doing, but I missed that fantastic number. This one's crazy. I don't know where I want to see this. Let's face it, Georgia needs this win more than I think Tennessee. Because if Georgia goes to 3 losses, if they get in the college football playoffs with 3 losses, I'm hanging myself on the show. Because no team, I don't care if you're in the SEC, deserves a playoff spot with 3 losses. I think this is a must-win game for Georgia, not Tennessee, because people still believe Georgia's the best football team in college football right now. You can't say that with 3 losses.
Well, people can believe that Georgia's the best team in college football, but they're not. They're obviously.
I agree.
Right? And they've been underachievers all season. They're 1-7 against the spread in their last 8 games. And they just haven't looked good. They haven't looked good even in their wins. They possibly could have lost that game 2 weeks ago against Florida, a mediocre to bad Florida team, if Florida's quarterback doesn't go down. They were unconvincing in their win over Auburn, their win over Mississippi State. Their quarterback's turning the ball over too much. I think people are having a hard time divorcing themselves from what Georgia did, winning back-to-back championships, almost making it 3 in a row, what they were during that kind of Stetson Bennett era, and then a little bit last year with Brock Bowers, Ladd McConkey, and still a lot of the defensive holdovers, and what they are now. This is kind of a rebuilding season. You can't lose as much talent to the NFL as Georgia has over the last 3 drafts and stay right there in that top 5. So that being said, is desperation enough of a motivator for them here? What are you seeing in the matchup? Forget the number for a second. What do you see in the matchup of Tennessee versus Georgia?
But Tennessee has some injury, especially on the offensive side. The quarterback was limping around last game. He has practiced this week, but how healthy is he going to be going to Athens to play Georgia on this game? This defense is nothing like we've seen that Georgia's had the past couple of seasons. And you said it correctly. There's so many starters in the NFL that came from Georgia. This had to come back to bite them sooner or later. And no disrespect to Beck, he's not Stenson Bennett. He's not the quarterbacks we've seen in the past for Georgia. I do believe Georgia wins this game, but if it climbs up to 12, 12 and a half, 13, I might have to sprinkle something on the Vols. I just don't think they're that Tennessee team to win by 2 touchdowns almost. This is going to be very interesting. I'm excited not to just watch this game, but to see what the number closes at in this game.
I think also a big motivator on this line movement is the fact that Georgia has absolutely wrecked Tennessee.
Yes.
They have dominated them for the past decade plus. They're 7-0. They've beaten them 7 straight times in this series, 6-1 against the spread. And the average margin of victory for Georgia in those wins is 26.4 points. So none of these games have been close. Factor in Georgia on the bounce back, Georgia getting that home crowd. The fact that, and this is kind of a quirk in Tennessee's schedule, they've only played 3 road games this year. They're coming off a stretch where they've had 4 straight home games. So now they're jumping right into the Lions' den. I'm with you. What I do with this game on Thursday with my service is going to determine just on where this line goes. Are we going to see a little bit of a buyback from the public maybe at some point to get that number back down to like 10, 10 and a half? I mean, Tennessee is the number 7 team in the country. Do you think that the dumb money that comes in on this, the public money, do you think it's going to come in on the Georgia side, kind of the sharp side here? Or do you think that people are going to wake up Saturday morning and be like, hey, top 10, Tennessee, number 7 in the country, they're getting 11 or 12 points. I'm going to throw my money there.
No, because you can't really say that, because if it was 8.5 or 9, the Sharps probably took that low number. And so if it keeps on climbing, the Sharps are going to buy back and try to middle this game. So this one's going to be very interesting to see what the two-way action really actually goes. I figure the Sharps are jumping at the bits, waiting to see if this keeps on climbing, as Joe Public keeps on betting this, watching the college football playoff rankings the other night, saying, oh, I can't believe Georgia's not in it, but Boise State's going to be in the tournament. What the heck? Georgia's going to beat up on Tennessee. Wah. That public dumb money will be on Georgia because they're at home. So, again, this is something very interesting. I can tell you right now, this is not one of my plays on Thursday, because I don't want to release a number and then Saturday night it's a totally different number, and I'm kicking myself that I could have got either a better number or a worse number. I'm passing completely on this game, and maybe I'm probably going to look at maybe some live betting on this one, because you can really get a very interesting number if you live bet this.
Okay, the second game that I wanted to talk about, another top 10 team with kind of another odd number, a number that kind of really jumped out at me Sunday night, Monday morning when I was looking at these, and that's Kansas at BYU. Okay, BYU, they're undefeated. They have some nice wins this year. They pummeled Kansas State. They're coming off the Holy War win over Utah on the road last week. They're the only team that's beaten SMU so far this year. So BYU got to feel a little comfortable right now with where they are in relation to that, to making it to that playoff. And then we have Kansas on the other side. This was a team that came into the season with a lot of hype, sleeper team and kind of a wide open Big 12. It has not gone their way. It has kind of fallen apart for Kansas. They're 3-6 straight up this year. So they are going out to BYU, and they're only a 3-point underdog. Again, help me wrap my brain around this one, Raphael.
Yeah, when this number came out, I'm like, oh, it's going to be 4 quickly. It's going to be 4 by the time I want to release something on Thursday, if I do want to release this play, or the number is going to come in BYU, because I was totally blown away. And then I was totally wrong, because some books dropped it down to 2.5. So I have no clue. I thought maybe it was a basketball game. Okay, Kansas will whoop BYU if basketball. Maybe that's why this number is so bad. I'm totally blown away on this one. I don't understand why this number is coming in and why Blackhawk Jayhawk money is coming in. So I think BYU has no issue winning this game. You said it. Kansas has been struggling all season long. They just can't wait for the season to go. The head coaches are probably looking at the transfer portal already to replace some of these guys that underperformed all year long for them. I don't understand this. Well, BYU's defense is no joke. We saw it against the Holy War. But why can we call that game the Holy War, but we can't call Jacksonville or Florida Georgia's game, whatever the game, whenever with the cocktail party? That doesn't make sense. But BYU's defense was outstanding in the, yes, I'm going to call it the Holy War game. There's no joke. If I'm anybody in the college football playoffs, if you're looking at to avoid a team, you don't want to play BYU. I'd rather play Boise State than BYU.
BYU is 8-2 against the spread in their last 10 games. They have been really, really good at home this year. Maybe they're in a letdown situation after that big rivalry win. We see that all the time. Or maybe they're going to get a big boost playing at home with that top 10 ranking. But we both agree this is an odd number, that this one doesn't really make a whole lot of sense, that this number should probably be at least a touchdown. Top 10 team at home against a 3-6 disappointment team. They, normally you see them laying double digits in a situation like this. So let me ask you this, Raphael. Is the sharp decision, is the wise decision to kind of steer into the skid and say, you know what, I don't understand why this number is so small. This might be a little bit of a red flag here. Let me bet with the books here and let me jump on Kansas? Or do you just say, you know what, BYU is covering. They're going to keep covering. I know this is a weird number. This doesn't make any sense mathematically or just from a handicapping perspective. I'm just going to keep riding BYU.
I would do both. I mean, I called a couple books yesterday when I saw this number was interesting, and they told me no big action came on this game. There's not no sharp, no public, just, mediocre $20 here, $50 here, $100 here, nothing outrageous, no high five-figure come in on this game, which was kind of rare because I really thought, oh, yeah, we got hammered by KU money right away. That's why this number is so low. I was waiting for that answer to say, okay, that's why the number it is, because they're heavy on KU action right now, but they're not. So I don't understand why the public hasn't or the wise guys haven't pounced on BYU on this one. I have a question for you. You said the letdown game. Is that really a factor now that we have college ball playoffs and people are fighting for a 12-week playoff? Can you really say letdown? Because let's say if you're BYU in Indiana, you can't have a letdown or a look ahead game anymore. Hey, if I'm Indiana, I know we play Ohio State next week, but we can't. Or BYU, hey, we had a battle with Utah last week. We need to move on because we just moved up in the rankings. Is that still a factor? Do these kids and coaches look at that now? Or do you say, hey, you know what? We just watched Tuesday's show. We moved up. Let's take care of business on Saturday.
No, I 100% think that it's still a situation. You see this to a lesser extent in professional sports. You see teams have letdowns, look aheads, things like that. That's a very real phenomenon. And I think it's even more so with college because they're kids. Okay, what is important to us and what we think should be important to them may not be as important to these kids. These are 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old children, basically. Okay, and that wave of emotion is very, very real. We see it all the time. We see it in a variety of sports. So yes, I always say that, gambling isn't magic, it's mathematics. 80% of this game is understanding the numbers, right? The other 20% is understanding psychology. Okay, group psychology, team psychology, understanding how people respond to different stressors. And yeah, that was a tough game last week against a bitter rival. It was a physical game. It was a game they probably shouldn't have won. I know that, BYU's AD got fined for making comments about the officiating because it was bad in the fourth quarter of that game. And now it's going to be a little bit more difficult for BYU to get as up for this game against Kansas, 3-6 Kansas, as it was for them to get up for that game. Now, if it was USC coming to town, if it was some other top 20 team coming to town, maybe not. Maybe they'd have no problem. But right now, I think that this is a very big issue for the Jayhawks.
The only reason why I asked that question, because college football, and we can even throw in college basketball because the bubble and stuff like that with bracketology. College football now is the only sport that every Tuesday, if you're in or out in the college football playoffs. No one else does that. Actually, they have a special, every newspaper, every website. Here's the new rankings. Here's who's in and out on college football playoffs. It's, to me, if I was an athlete and my nephew's plays college basketball for CMU, and he tells me this all the time. But he's like, yeah, when we were in summer practices, we always talked about letdown, but we can't have letdown effects because if you're on that bubble, you need to perform to try to get out of that bubble and stuff like that. And for me, college football now is so much to play for because every Tuesday now, if you're in and out.
Well, again, going back to that Georgia-Tennessee game, right? So Georgia dropped 11 spots in the rankings last week. You think that that's not going to be on their mind this week? Do you think that that
Yeah.
isn't going to
Yeah, I
give them
agree.
a little bit extra motivation for this game? Of course it is. Of course it's on their mind. And because we're dealing with these hyper emotional, teenagers and stuff like that, I think that that's magnified in a sport like college football. Okay, so the next game that we want to talk about is featuring another top 25 team, top 25 adjacent, two teams that are kind of knocking on the door.
Yes.
We got Tulane and Navy. Now, this was one of the ones that you singled out. So why don't you take the lead on this one?
So Tulane opened at -6, and I laughed. Then they moved to 7. I still laughed a little bit more, and I made a phone call, say, hey, you know what? Jump down on this. I need to get Tulane on this one. I don't understand this number. Yes, Navy has been really, really good, but now they're coming off back-to-back losses. Now, pretty much that Army-Navy game is just pretty much an Army game in that one. There's nothing really significant now in that game except the specialty, and it's the only game that they prayed before all that. We all know about the Army-Navy situation. But Tulane, they just keep on moving up in the ranking. I know they have a very long shot, but they've been really, really good since that game against Oklahoma. They have outscored their opponents 312 to 119 since their loss to Oklahoma. This team is just rolling right now. They control the run game. Both lines of scrimmage, offense and defense, control the game. Their defense has been lights out. I guess one game against Rice, it was bad weather, so it was a sloppy game. That's why Rice scored a lot of points at the second half. It was more because of weather, not because their defense just wasn't playing well. I just like this Tulane. I'm blown away. Yes, I know they're on the road, but I think if you're Navy going back-to-back losses, I mean, what are you actually playing for? And Tulane has all the momentum going on right now. This one will move probably to 7.5. I don't think 8, but that number, this opening number was 6. I don't understand why they opened up at 6 because they knew they were going to get jumped on Tulane. So now, if you're an odds maker, where are we going to get Navy money coming in? No one's going to oh, Navy. I think they can beat this game. Granted, we're at home, but you're not going to get that. They should have opened it up at 7.5 to get that number for Navy money, and then kept it at 7. I just don't understand what they were doing opening up at 6 right away.
Okay, that was going to be my question: is where do you have this number? Where do you think this number should have come down? Because I don't think 7.5 is enough either, to be completely honest with you. I thought that a number closer, for all the reasons that you mentioned. Tulane has just been absolutely wrecking people. They're obviously the better team. Navy has been inflated and a little bit overrated and a little bit overvalued all season. I thought this number should have been closer to double digits. So where would you have
8-9? I made it 8-9, and 8 I had a question mark on it, thinking, okay, maybe they'll do 7.5 and move the juice off 7.5, which I don't know why books have been doing that lately, moving juice off 7.5 instead of just 7. It makes no sense. They're just greedy and want to hold 10% more than they want to hold 6 or 7%. But I really thought it was going to be between 8 and 9, and I thought, okay, if it's 9, it's going to be 10 by kickoff, and there's going to be no value.
You're not scared about the fact that Navy's one good win this year did come at home, did come as a home underdog against Memphis, the Memphis team that everyone thought was going to roll through this conference?
No, because I thought Tulane was going to take a step backwards this year. Had new head coach, new quarterback, but they got a lot of good transfers that played at really good schools, which you don't hear about that as much for Tulane. Tulane's a law school, business school. The athletes don't really go there to play sports, but this football program has been on upwards for the past 4 years. So everything I looked in the past, I know these two teams have played in the past, and Navy has owned this year's season, but that's the old Tulane. It's a totally different Tulane. The students actually go to these games and now these days to watch Tulane play. You're right. It should have been double digits, but I think there's great value with the Green Wave in this game.
All right, talking about just phenomenal colleges, just amazing schools to go to. That's a perfect transition to the Syracuse, California game.
I knew it.
As we know, Syracuse might be the best school in the country. I don't know. That I hear people are saying that about my alma mater. But this was a number that jumped out at me, Raphael. Syracuse has been a little bit of an overachiever. They've been kind of feisty this year. Almost knocked off Boston College. Probably should have won that game last week in Chestnut Hill. But 8.5-point underdogs out in Cal. Odd matchup. These are not, they're two ACC opponents that have never played each other in the ACC. Just seemed a little bit high. Is there something about this Cal team that I'm missing here, or anti-Syracuse sentiment, even though they have been kind of good as an underdog? They beat Virginia Tech a couple weeks ago. They went out to UNLV and beat UNLV when UNLV was in the top 25. What am I missing? Why is this number so thick? I thought something between 4.5 and 6 would have been more appropriate for this.
Let me see.
For this
Let me see
game.
what I made
It wouldn't have been a red flag for me.
I made it 6. I made this number 6. And as you were talking, FanDuel just moved it to 8.5. Like just when you were just talking, it was kind of weird how my thing dinged, and I looked.
They watch. They know. They watch. They understand. They're fans of the show.
That kind of threw my thought off when I turned and looked at my screen, and it was actually that game. I agree. I think it's a tad too high on this one, but you said it. They should have won last week. A bad hiccup game. We're going to talk about Boston College as one of my games. We're going to talk about that a little bit shortly, but I agree. A tad high, but you called it. I mean, this Syracuse team in the second half of UNLV, I thought that was going to be their momentum factor. I'm like, okay, this is going to be a team maybe you want to look for the next couple of years, how they played in the second half against UNLV at the Death Star. But yeah, they have too many heckle and jive kind of factors on this one. Sometimes the defense is lacking, a lot of missed tackles, especially in the secondary. It's like I'm watching the Dallas Cowboys play in orange. It's kind of iffy on this one, but I think it's a tad high on this one.
Yeah, the only thing I can think of is that this is Syracuse's 5th road game in the last 6 that they've played. That Virginia Tech home game was the only home game they played in about a month and a half. They're in Boston last week. Now they're in Berkeley this week. That's a lot of travel for the kids. But even so, it's still, I feel, hard to justify Cal as a favorite of more than a touchdown here. This is a team that lost to Florida State, and Florida State is absolute trash. Cal lost at home as a 9-point favorite, similar line to what we're seeing here with Syracuse, and they lost outright to an NC State team that I don't think is as good as the Syracuse team. And when I look at Cal and Syracuse, what they do well are very similar. I believe Syracuse is number 6 in the country in passing offense. Cal is number 20 in the country in passing offense. And then as I look at these teams defensively, offensively, really the only big difference I see between the two of them is turnovers. Okay. Cal is plus 11 in turnover differential. I believe they're in the top 20. Actually, no. They're number 1 in the country in takeaways. Syracuse is minus 7 in turnovers. So you give Cal the edge there, but turnovers are one of those fluky stats, right? Like the center doesn't hold for something like turnovers as a statistic as it does, say, run defense that you can count on each week. So I just feel like if Syracuse does take care of the ball and doesn't throw up on themselves here, that 8.5 points, again, just seems too much for a game that it wouldn't stun me if Syracuse could pull off a win. Am I far off on that? Do you think Syracuse could win this game? Or again, going back to that Kansas BYU thing, should this be a situation where I say, you know what, this line doesn't make sense when we break this number down on where we expect it to be, what the matchups are, what the statistics say, maybe we should be looking at Cal?
No, because like I said, my numbers was only 1 or 2 points off, and it's all about pace of the game. If Syracuse can control the pace of the game, if it's a high-scoring game, then yes, I think the Orange can pull off the upset. You called it. Their passing game for the Orange is outstanding, and that if they're passing and controlling the pace of the game, then they have a really, really good shot of keeping this game close or pulling off the big road upset. It's all about if they can control their pace of the game.
Okay, so you mentioned Syracuse opponent last week, Boston College, that they were playing a game this week that really jumped out at you. They are 17-point underdogs, the Eagles are, heading out to SMU. Obviously, the big news in this game yesterday came when Boston College coach Bill O'Brien announced that he was benching his starting quarterback, Castellanos, and going to Grayson James, the FIU transfer that he went to in the second half of that Syracuse game last week. Raphael, 2 things about this game. Okay. Obviously it jumped out at you. So I want to hear what kind of set off the red flags for you prior to that announcement. And then how do you feel about this game and this number and how we should play this after the quarterback change?
This one opened up at 14.5, and some shops have 18.5 on this game right there. Even the 14.5, I'm like, okay, that makes a little bit of sense. Quarterback change. 18.5. Boston College, if they run the ball, they had 2 running backs last week to rush over 120 plus. I think one of them had 198 yards for rushing. If they can do that and still lose the game, there's no way that cover of 19 is going to happen if Boston College can run the ball. I was talking about pace of the game. This one, if Boston College can play even half of a game of their pace in the game, there's no way I think this is going to be a high scoring game that they can cover 19 and a half in there. SMU does win. They're a much better team. I'm not a big fan of this FIU quarterback that's transferred anywhere. There's a reason why he transferred, because he sucks. So I'm not a big fan of that. I can see the line movement when they announced that one. But they're a running game. They're not a passing game. If they can run the ball, this is all about if they can run the ball. I'm talking about. This is something I would look at live betting more than pulling the trigger, unless I can get 21, and that's ridiculous on that. But this is something I want to look at, just because Boston College established the run first and keep that offensive SMU watching this game and try to keep this game as close as possible. They're not pulling off the upset, but this would not shock me if SMU wins by like 14.
Really? Yeah, I kind of agree with you. I mean, Boston College has been kind of a feisty underdog so far this year. They went down and beat Florida State when Florida State was still something as a 17-point underdog in that game. They nearly beat Missouri out at Missouri. They nearly beat Louisville as a 13-point home underdog.
Won against Louisville.
What's that?
They should have beaten Louisville.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I believe I had them. I released them in my service that week. And they've been a good underdog in this range, right? But with looking at SMU, how should we be handicapping them? On the one hand, they've won 6 straight. They absolutely mauled Pittsburgh in that big game that they played against them at home. Here's another big game at home. They're number 14 in the country. They're right on the outside looking in for that top 12 playoff situation. You know, they're knocking on the door for a potential ACC championship game appearance and a potential ACC championship in their first year in this conference. Should we be riding the momentum with SMU, or do you see this more as a situation where you kind of feel the noose starting to tighten a little bit around SMU, where the pressure is starting to build? Maybe they're not as good as what the odds makers and the public and their top 25 rankings suggest. What are you seeing here with the Mustangs?
I just think the line's too overflated. It's just like IU. If you're now betting Indiana, where were you when the start of college football? Because their numbers are gone right now. You're not getting value. They're still winning games. Like last week, they didn't cover. I think the same thing. We're going to see that now with SMU. That game against Pittsburgh took a lot of eyes on the odds makers' point of view and a bettor's point of view. But Pittsburgh couldn't run the ball that game. That's why they got smoked out, and they had to be a pass-happy team to try to play catch-up, and it just wasn't for them. This is all about Boston College being able to run. If they can't run the ball, we're going to see an ugly, ugly, ugly game, and SMU rolls. I think the offensive line and the running game of Boston College is better than what we saw in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I kind of agree with your analysis on this whole game, and I just don't think that the quarterback change makes that big of a difference for Boston College. I really don't.
That's why I think this number keeps on climbing upwards. People are going to realize, they make a quarterback change. People don't even know who the quarterback name that they're changing the bettors. Yeah, right. They're just going to see that on the websites and stuff like that. Oh, they made a quarterbacking change. Let's bet SMU. SMU just beat up on Pittsburgh.
In a way, it reminds me a little bit of what we saw in college basketball last week with that Auburn-Houston college basketball game, right? Thursday night, the big news comes out that Auburn had to divert their flight because players were fighting on the plane, right? So I'm sure a lot of people looked at that and were like, okay, this Auburn team is unraveling. They don't like each other. This is a bad situation. Well, all they did was beat, the Ken Pom #1 team in the country, Houston, as a 5-point underdog the next game. Not saying Boston College is going to do that, but I do agree with you that people might be overreacting to some headlines involving this game. So, all right, shifting gears to the NFL. First game that I want to talk about was the Ravens-Steelers. And I got to tell you, Raphael, there's 2 things when I was diving in on this game that surprised me. The first is obviously that Pittsburgh is posted as a home underdog. All right, when you just think about Mike Tomlin and his record as an underdog, the guy is a gambling god, okay? Love me some Mike Tomlin. But as I was digging a little deeper, what it made it even more shocking, I did not even realize this. I did not realize that the Steelers have won 7 of the last 8 games with Baltimore. You think about this rivalry, you think about how even it would be, maybe even Baltimore having the upper hand because they've been the better team the last 3, 4, 5 years. No, Pittsburgh has actually dominated this series, winning 7 out of the last 8. Why are the Steelers, who are 7-2, coming off a nice win again as an underdog last week against Washington? Why are they home underdogs here against Baltimore in a series that has been all about the underdog, and B, against a team that they've owned the last few years?
Yeah, at my show that I do in the mornings over at DTL, we were complaining about this. And at that time on Monday morning, Pittsburgh was plus 3.5 at DraftKings. And I'm like, so disrespectful for Mike Tomlin. Just give him a coach of the year right now, even though it's only week 11. I don't see anyone else even coming close to that. But you're right. They won those games with some bad quarterbacks. Old Big Ben was some of those quarterbacks. Mason Rudolph was some of those. It's not like they had really good quarterbacks when they were beating up Baltimore Ravens of those games that you were talking about. They had some bad QBs. And I just think the momentum is all on Pittsburgh. I have no idea why this is still plus 3. There's no more 3.5s out there. At least I can not complain about that right now, but still disrespect for Pittsburgh right now. And I know this is their first, I can't believe this. Week 11, this is their first division game. It just cracks me up when I read that. I just don't understand what the schedule makers were doing on this one. But people like, hey, they have a tough schedule because now they're all playing the Bengals twice, the Ravens twice. But you know what? They still have to play the Browns twice, and that would cash those 2 games could cash their total season wins. This game against Baltimore could cash some of those total season wins on it. Disrespected. I like Pittsburgh in this one. I don't know what I'm going to do with this game, but I like Pittsburgh at home.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. The underdog is 10-1 against the spread in the last 11 meetings. So many of these games have landed on that 3 exactly. They're usually old school, very physical, very low scoring. You look at some of the totals and total combined points in some of these games. It should be a slugfest, really. The Ravens are 7-1 straight up in their last 8 games, but the loss was a divisional opponent at Cleveland. And then last week against Cincinnati, we all saw that game. I don't want to say they should have lost, but they absolutely could have lost with Cincinnati lining up that 2-point conversion and not getting the calls on that. So the Ravens have struggled a little bit within their division. I think they could struggle here. And I kind of agree with you. Like it's been like, not almost, it has been like this for me for the last few years. If I see Pittsburgh as an underdog, they're a blind bet. I don't care the situation. I don't care who they're playing. Mike Tomlin has been that good catching the points that I think he's worth betting blind. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, they've covered 7 games this year. I mean, I don't understand I don't understand why this number it is. This one's probably the biggest confusing number out of all football games this weekend. I'm even throwing a Grey Cup in this one. I don't understand the disrespect of the Pittsburgh Steelers right now at home. Neutral field, I can understand, but they're at home in Heinz Field. This is it totally blows my head. Blows my head away.
I agree with you. And then the other number that jumped out at me, which I'm sure jumped out at a lot of people, probably the line a lot of people were quick to see where it was going to open up, is Kansas City at Buffalo. So the Bills are 2.5-point favorites in this game. A lot to unpack with this number. You know, they're not the token 3-point favorite at home. It's almost like they're baiting you to try to bet on Buffalo because you're not laying the field goal. On the other hand, you have Kansas City that's won, whatever it is, 48 straight games. They're undefeated. They're 9-0, 2-time defending champions. They've owned Buffalo in the playoffs the last few years. They're underdogs in this game. So where do you think, okay, again, a lot of things to unpack here. First of all, do you think that it's a red flag that an undefeated team this late in the season is posted as an underdog? Not just in this situation with Kansas City and Buffalo, but just in general. Is that something that the alarms start going off for you, or do you not really look at numbers that way?
Normally I do, because I remember working at MGM when the Patriots were perfect and we were getting crushed every week because they were covering games and looking dominant. This KC team is not even close to those Patriots undefeated team. So I think that's what's probably making me step back and say, hey, you know what? Ooh, it's not a 9-0 team versus the Buffalo Bills at Buffalo. Because this is not Patrick Mahomes has not looked like MVP Patrick Mahomes. If I had to do a voting, he's not even in my top 5 right now as MVP of the league. This is not an undefeated team in my eyes. do I think Buffalo could win this game? Yeah, because they've beaten them before. They're not scared of Kansas City. There's two teams that can guarantee they're not scared of Kansas City, and that's the Bills and the Bengals. Maybe everyone else may be like, oh, they beat us last time, or they beat us in the Super Bowl or whatever. Two teams that are not afraid of the Kansas City Chiefs, and one of them is playing them on Sunday. This is weird because there's two books. One has 2, and one has 1.5 on this game. So I'm very curious to see. I'm going to make a couple texts and emails later on today to see what kind. Are they really getting that kind of Kansas City action now, or are they waiting for it and trying to see if they can get Buffalo Bills action now and do buybacks later on Saturday and then Sunday, of course. But I'm very curious to see why two books have. That's a big difference, 2.5 and 2 on this big major game. I'm very curious to see what they tell me.
Well, that was going to be my next question is what is your prediction on which direction the money is going to flow on this game this week?
I think Buffalo. I think people, they remind me of the Patriots when it comes to everyone hates them because they always win, but then they never bet them. So this is kind of what we're going to see in this one. I think people just want to see them lose. So I would not be shocked if we get late Buffalo action. I don't think we'll see 3. I would be blown away if we see 3. I think it's going to be either 2, 2.5. It would not be shocked if it's 2.5 minus 120 by kickoff.
Okay, so
I don't.
It seems like the sharp side, if we're just reading this number, is the favorite, is Buffalo.
Yes.
Here. Okay,
yes.
They've beaten them 3 straight times in the regular season. Okay, the sharps are going to be on Buffalo. However, Patrick Mahomes is 11-3 straight up and 12-2 against the spread the last 14 times that he has been an underdog. So shouldn't we be throwing a lot of that stuff out the window and just saying it's Kansas City, they're getting points, I'm taking them, and if Buffalo wins, oh well, better to lose money betting on the best team than to try and be sharp and go with Buffalo and then have Kansas City roll them like they did in the playoffs last year. Should this be Kansas City or nothing, or stay on the sharp side, stay with the sharp money, go with the Bills here?
I would say for a public point of view, the eyeball test is what they saw last game when Kansas City barely beat Denver. And what did they see the last time they showed Patrick Mahomes on TV after the black punt? He was limping still off the field. So he was limping the whole game. He wasn't the Patrick Mahomes we saw where he has one running play that he runs for 15 yards, and everyone who bet the under rushing yards for Patrick Mahomes like, son of a bitch, I can't believe I just lost already. Because he always has that one long run in every game. He didn't have it against Denver. He limped a lot. So I think the eyeball test, it could be a lot reasoning why Buffalo money is coming, because he's not healthy. Let's face it, he's probably not going to be healthy with that ankle for a while. So I think that has a lot to do with it.
All right. These teams met in the playoffs in January of 2021. Okay. Since that game, this is going to be the 7th meeting between these two teams, regular season and playoff. This is only going to be the 2nd time that they've played in Orchard Park. We know that Buffalo is a different team, that can be kind of a special environment in Buffalo. It did not help the Bills last year in the postseason, but they're also going to want revenge, obviously, for getting beat there. How much do you factor in the home field advantage with these two teams?
There's a couple ballparks in football that it's huge, and I'll put Bills Mafia as one of them. Lambeau Field is another one. Those two teams, I would say the home field matters, especially if there's weather involved in those two teams on there. But yeah, I think home field advantage for Bills Mafia, especially after the outcome they saw in the playoffs. It's going to be loud. It's going to be Bills Mafia. You don't want to mess with them.
Okay, last game that we're going to talk about, Monday Night Football. This was yours. This was one that you said jumped off the board at you. We have the Texans at the Cowboys. Texans 7.5 point favor at Dallas. Dallas is, they're not even off the rails. There's no analogy that I can say for them.
No.
They're just a mess. So what was it about this number that really surprised you? Do you think it should be higher? Or do you think that there's a little bit of value here on the home underdog, thinking, hey, it's Monday Night Football. Our season's pretty much in the toilet anyway, but this is an opportunity for us to show out as a home dog?
I thought the total was a tad low. I thought the total would be opened up around 45, 44. 42 is, Houston has to come in a little PO too. They have not been playing well at all. And they need to spike up their offense for these games ahead that they have against division rivals coming up ahead. So what better way to improve your offense than to play the Dallas Cowboys in their backyard? Because Dallas defense sucks. I can say they suck at home. Everyone has been rolling them at home. We were just talking about Bills Mafia and home field advantage. Jerry Dome has no home field advantage. Their last home game, they didn't barely had any Cowboy fans. They were just the road fans were all over the place. One of the reasons why I picked this one, the total is low. I think this one flies over on a Monday Night Football game. I think Houston puts up a lot of points just because everyone else has Green Bay, the Eagles. Like the list can go on how many people have blown up the Cowboys defense at Jerry's World. Why don't you flex this game out, people? This is the Monday Night Football. This is the showcase of the NFL. This is when the Mannings have their own show. This is when it's on ESPN Plus, ESPN, ABC. This is the Monday Night Football game that you're making us watch. I'm going to watch Monday Night Raw, maybe Elf. I'm sure that's going to be on TBS. I will not watch this game live. I'll watch this at the late at night when I'm doing other stuff. Give me a break. Value on a total, but no value on the Cowboys. I hope they do get Deion Sanders as their head coach to punish them for making me watch Monday Night Football this game.
There's a lot in that segment. Well done. Really well done. It looks like another week where the Thursday night game with the Eagles and Washington, the numbers are going to, for Amazon, are going to blow away what ESPN is doing on Monday Night Football. And those numbers have been down all year. I mean, obviously, first thought is with everyone else, it's the Texans or nothing, right? There's no way I'm betting on the Cowboys right now. No way, with as bad as they have looked. One thing though, last week the underdogs of 6 points or more went 6-2 against the spread. The last 2 weeks, they're 10-5 against the spread. This kind of echoes what we saw at the very beginning of the year when the first 4 or 5 weeks of the season, I think teams that were underdogs of 6 points or more were 15-2 against the spread. Do you factor in those kind of league-wide trends when you're breaking down games like this? Would you look at this and say, hey, I'm just taking the Texans because the Cowboys are a disaster right now, and they'll probably lose this game by 3 touchdowns. Texans need this one. Or do you look at this one and say, you know what, as much as I like the Texans and as bad as the Cowboys are, these big underdogs just keep covering. So, maybe I should pull back a little bit. What are your thoughts on that?
31 of the teams, I would say yes. The one team that I'm not putting him in that factor is the Dallas Cowboys, because it's been a complete train wreck. Don't forget, the Saints put up 44 points against the Cowboys defense. How the Saints do right now? They fired their head coach. They have a special teams head coach right now. The Eagles put up 34 in a blink of an eye. They could have scored 40, but the fourth quarter, they just ran the ball and let Barkley just watch his TV tablet. I'm sure he was watching Deadpool 3 on the tablet, watching the rest of the game. But I just, like I said, total over game. Hopefully I can catch my total by halftime so I can watch some of those.
All right, Raphael, we got to get out of here. This is the end of What Are the Odds? But before we go, we got to give you a free play. Give the people something that they can use.
I'm going right back to the Monday Night Football game. Bet this one over. I not sold. Micah Parsons throwing his head coach underneath the bus. So how's the defense going to want to support him on the D side all week long when he's throwing players or head coaches underneath the bus? I'm not sold on this Cowboys defense. If you're Houston and you want to be ready for the next couple of games against your division rivals, you want to pump up your offense to put up a big number when no one else is playing that day. Your Monday Night Football. If you're Houston, CJ Stroud, you might have a great game so people can forget about the 2 studs you had last back-to-back games. I think it's going to be a bloodbath in points.
I hope so. I hope you're right, because I like the Texans in that game as well. For my free play, I'm actually going with Kansas. Okay, this is one of those situations where I look at a line, it doesn't make any sense, and I'm going to bet it. I'm going to bet it anyway. I think this Kansas team is a little bit better than their record and some of their statistics suggest. They've dealt with some injury issues with Jalen Daniels, had some turnover issues, had a really tough schedule early in the year also, but they've won 2 out of their last 3 games. The one loss was at Kansas State when they almost beat them. They lost by 2 points there. This is a team that has close losses. I'm talking really close losses within 6 points of Arizona State, at West Virginia, against UNLV, Illinois, Kansas State, as we mentioned. These are good teams. Some of those losses, like back to Illinois and to UNLV early in the season, they seemed like bad losses for the Jayhawks, but now you look at those teams that they turned out to be legit. I think that this Kansas team is a little bit better than their record suggests that it is. I think BYU is a little worse than its record suggests that it is. I don't see this team going undefeated through the regular season. I think they're going to take a loss at some point, and it's probably going to come against somebody that you don't expect it to. And I think that could be it. So, all right, Raphael, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
Yes, you happy Mormons. Robert Ferringo's phone number is 1-800.
They love me as always. All right, that's it for What Are the Odds this week. Make sure to check back next Wednesday. In the meantime, carpe diem and good luck.